I was cooking dinner at home when my husband, Mike, came home earlier than usual. I hadn't gone out to greet him, but I noticed the sound of 2 sets of footsteps coming from the hallway and stopped my cooking. How unusual. Was he bringing someone home? Mike walked heavily down the hall and, upon bursting through the door, suddenly turned to me and blurted out, "We're living together from today. If you don't like it, leave." I was shocked by his sudden statement, but when I glanced next to Mike, I saw an unexpected figure. It was Ken. He is a boy we often see at the park while walking the dog. Our eyes met, and I gasped. Meanwhile, Mike kept insisting on living together without explaining the situation. Repeating himself over and over, not letting me get a word in. I couldn't believe Mike would bring Ken home. After letting Mike finish his spiel, I replied, "All right." He must have thought my intimidation meant I agreed to the cohabitation. Mike had a smug look on his face as if to say, "Of course." However, his expression changed completely with one sentence from Ken. "Finally!" With a bright smile on his face, Ken made me smile too. Mike was the only one looking perplexed, wondering what was happening. "Really? What you said has come true?" It was unbelievable. Who would have thought our wish would come true in this way? Ever since I learned a certain truth, I had hoped for this. The alarm clock rang, and another day began. I'm Teresa, soon to be 50 years old. I live with my husband, Mike, who usually leaves for work before I wake up. I wonder if he'll come home late again today. In the early days of our marriage, I used to see off Mike as he said, "I'm off," and welcome him at the entrance with a smile when he returned home. That habit has completely disappeared, and now Mike leaves the house without a word to me, hurrying off. I wonder when it started, but my husband and I haven't been getting along. There could be various reasons for marital strife, such as lack of communication, differing values, or in-law issues. In our case, it began with my infertility. We both wanted children from the start of our marriage and sought treatment at a gynecologist's office. There can be many causes for infertility, like ovulation disorders or immunological issues, but I never knew the exact reason for mine. Despite continued treatment, we were unable to conceive, and before I knew it, I had reached this age. Initially, I thought my husband, Mike, was quite supportive. He often accompanied me to the clinic, and sometimes he would research infertility and share his findings with me. I remember him finding exercises and supplements that were supposed to increase fertility and encouraging me to try them. Even as the treatments became more advanced, the shock of not being able to conceive was immeasurable each time, but Mike cried and grieved with me. However, he gradually started to show irritation and would snap hurtful words at me. "It's your fault we can't have kids. What are you going to do about it? Don't say that." The cruel words from Mike, whom I wished to be understanding, gradually wore me down. Now, whenever we see each other, we either argue or don't talk at all, leading a cold and distant marital life. In recent years, Mike has been coming home late from work, and we spend even less time together. Even though I spend every day at home feeling gloomy, there's something I look forward to. "Come on, Max. Let's go out." Max is my beloved dog, whom I started keeping about 5 years ago. From feeding to walking and buying dog supplies, I take care of everything. I wanted to have a dog to fill the void in my lonely married life, so I asked Mike. And he said, "Do whatever you want." So, I went to the pet shop alone and welcomed Max. Max is a Shih Tzu. His friendly nature and fluffy fur are very endearing. When his fur is cut, he takes on a rounded silhouette. Then, he was named Max. I was captivated by him at first sight when he looked at me from inside the showcase. Max, who was a very small puppy back then, has now grown up. I hear that 5 years old in dog years is about 36 in human years. Even though he's such a cutie, it feels strange to think of him as an adult. I've made it a habit to walk our usual route with Max in the mornings and evenings. Getting out and walking helps alleviate the gloominess stemming from the negative atmosphere at home. Max, who doesn't know the meaning of being shy, actively approaches anyone. Thanks to my walks, I've become well acquainted with people who often talk to me and others who walk their dogs. Talking through our pets makes the conversation feel more approachable than a one-on-one talk. Chatting with people I meet during walks has become one of my pleasures. Ah. Hi there, Auntie and Max. Hello, Ken. Good morning. Ken is a 6-year-old boy from the neighborhood, always full of smiles and charm. Since he always greets us during our walks, Max has grown very fond of him. What have you been up to today? I always ask Ken this question. Hearing it, Ken's face turned a bit sad. As I got to know Ken, I gradually understood his situation. Not only in the morning but also in the evening, he often wanders outside alone. His parents seem indifferent towards him. I've noticed that his clothes don't quite fit him and are a bit dirty, which bothers me. Could this be neglect? It doesn't seem like he's experiencing any direct violence. But, since I've never heard any happy stories about his parents, it's apparent they don't show him much affection, hinting at a sort of neglect. I've thought about reporting this to child services, but that could lead to the family being separated, which is concerning. Wondering if it's right for me to make a decision that could tear Ken's family apart, I've hesitated to make the call. If I sense any major issue, I'm prepared to intervene immediately, so I listen to Ken's stories and watch over him daily. What are you going to teach me today, Auntie? Let's see. How about we learn some spelling today? Lately, that's what we've been doing, teaching him various subjects each time we meet. The park bench has become our regular spot for these little learning sessions. Ken is a bright and quick learner, making teaching him quite rewarding. Having longed for a child and never having that wish fulfilled, Ken, who looks up to me, has become a dear presence in my life. I hope that having a trustworthy adult by his side makes his days a bit brighter. With this wish, I go about my day. The situation changed about a year after I first met Ken, on a rainy day. The autumn leaves that decorated the cityscape began to fall, bringing a slightly chilly season, but rain or shine, walking Max is a must. Some dogs might prefer to stay indoors on rainy days, but not Max. If he spends the day inside when it's raining, he ends up barking needlessly due to a lack of exercise. For me, it's also a nice change of scenery, so going out isn't a bother. I dress Max in his raincoat and head outside as usual. The fall and autumn leaves soaked by the rain cover the ground, creating a carpet of red. The scene is so beautiful that I stroll around, utterly enchanted. While walking our usual route with an umbrella, Max suddenly starts running. I almost fall over from the suddenness and call out to him. Hey, Max, what's the matter? Was there something he found intriguing? I really don't want to run in the rain, but once he starts, Max won't stop even if I call out to him. Giving up on stopping him, I decide to follow Max. Struggling to keep up with Max, who is pulling the leash strongly, we end up at the park we often visit. So, you wanted to play in the park, huh? I'm thinking about how much Max loves playing in the park when I notice a child in a familiar jacket sitting on a bench. It's Ken. For the first time, I realize Max started running because he caught Ken's scent, even on a rainy day. It's impressive, considering we meet him almost daily. I'm about to greet him as usual, but then I notice something's off and I'm taken aback. Ken is sitting by the bench, motionless. Without his usual cheerful smile, looking pale and clearly unwell. Ken! Are you okay? Why are you out here in the rain without an umbrella? Mom said she has a guest, so I had to leave. Ken speaks in a thin voice, close to tears. His clothes are drenched, and water drips from his hair. What kind of parent would kick out such a small child without an umbrella? What kind of nerve do they have? I'm utterly disgusted and feel tears welling up. Wondering what to do, I place my hand on Ken's forehead and immediately realize he has a fever, even without a thermometer. Seeing Ken unable to even stand, I feared he was in a critical condition. This situation was beyond what I could handle alone. Without hesitation, I called 911 and summoned an ambulance. At the same time, since I found his address and personal information among his belongings, I informed Ken's mother that he was being taken to the hospital by ambulance. The mother, surprised, acknowledged the information and abruptly ended the call. Though I had my thoughts about the mother's reaction, Ken's well-being was the priority. Although I'm not a relative, I was the only one who knew the circumstances and Ken wouldn't let go of my hand, so I accompanied him in the ambulance to the hospital. Holding Ken's hand tightly, I wished for his safety. Upon arrival, he was immediately taken to the treatment room and given N4. When I asked the doctor about his condition, it was confirmed that the cold had affected him. It's not surprising. In this chilly season, just being outside is enough to feel cold, let alone getting drenched in the rain. However, the doctor assured that there was no danger to his life and that he would recover with rest and nutrition, which relieved me. After a while, Ken's mother arrived at the hospital. It took her quite some time, even though their house shouldn't be far away, making me wonder what she had been doing. Despite explaining Ken's condition, she showed no gratitude, only annoyance. The child can go home. No hospitalization is necessary. While it's true that Ken's situation wasn't an emergency, I wondered if it was right to decide to send him home without properly listening to the doctor's advice. However, as an outsider, I hesitated to intervene. Ken went home with his mother, and while I was worried about him, I returned to my own home. It had gotten quite late, and the lights were already on at my house. When I opened the living room door, my husband, who had returned from work, looked angry. "Hey, where have you been wandering around? I come home tired, and dinner isn't even ready." His first words were a complaint about the lack of a prepared meal. He was banging on the table, clearly outraged. There was no sign of concern or curiosity from my husband about why his wife came home late. He expects understanding when he comes home late without a word, yet he demands it from me? While inwardly appalled, I honestly explained the situation. I talked about the neighborhood kid I'm friendly with, who was so feverish he could barely stand, and how I'd called an ambulance and accompanied him to the hospital, causing my delay. I had a faint hope that he would understand and say it couldn't be helped given the circumstances. But that hope was quickly shattered. "Don't meddle with other people's kids. You did something unnecessary. Nothing good comes from your actions." I stopped in my tracks while taking off my coat. My husband had dismissed everything I did for Ken and essentially my entire character. The Mike who used to be supportive at the beginning of our marriage was nowhere to be found. I used to talk back, but over time, I lost the energy to argue with someone so unresponsive. After berating me, Mike said, "Don't go doing whatever you please," and went off to another room, ending my long day. The atmosphere became even more strained and conversation scarcer than before. Having Max at home was my only solace, but Mike's presence made it feel like it wasn't my home, creating a restlessness. Perhaps feeling the awkwardness too, Mike started coming home later and later. About a month after the argument about Ken, I was cooking dinner when Mike returned earlier than usual. I didn't go out to greet him, but I noticed the sound of 2 sets of footsteps from the hallway and stopped cooking. It was unusual. Had he brought someone home? Mike walked heavily down the hall, burst through the door, and suddenly demanded, "We're living together from today. If you don't like it, leave." I was startled by his abrupt statement, but then I noticed an unexpected figure next to Mike. It was Ken. Our eyes met, and we both gasped. Throughout, Mike had been insisting on cohabitation without explaining anything, not letting me get a word in. I couldn't believe Mike would bring Ken home. After listening to Mike's explanation, I replied, "Okay." He probably thought my intimidation meant I agreed to the cohabitation. Mike had a smug look on his face, as if it were the most natural outcome. However, his expression changed completely with just one sentence from Ken. "Finally." Smiling back at Ken, I returned his cheerful grin. Only Mike looked puzzled, wondering what was being said. "Really, huh? What you said came true?" It's unbelievable. Who could have imagined our wish would come true in such a way? I had hoped for this ever since I learned a certain truth. The situation traces back to that rainy day when I helped Ken. Since then, my marital life with Mike had worsened, prompting me to hire a private investigator to look into Mike's suspected affair. I had long suspected Mike of infidelity. His return home was increasingly late. Sometimes not until the next day. When questioned, he claimed that socializing was part of being an employee, looking down on me as if it were obvious. But at his age, was it common to drink all night? I doubted it. The last straw was his smartphone. Taking me for technologically clueless, he carelessly messaged a woman without erasing the history. Though our relationship was already cold, this incident pushed me over the edge, and I had the detective agency investigate. I also took photos of his text messages as evidence. Days later, the detective agency informed me they had news. Upon visiting, they reported that Mike was cheating with a junior colleague, Julie. And they were frequently seen together in public, making gathering evidence of the affair straightforward. While I was prepared for some findings, the next revelation left me speechless. Mike had a secret child with Julie. And that child was Ken, whom I had grown close to. The world felt incredibly small. To my dismay, Mike, along with Julie, had been the ones carelessly leaving Ken outside because he was a nuisance at home. If it had been a mere fling, perhaps I could have forgiven him. But creating a secret family was unforgivable. Especially with Ken, who had just turned 7. I had recently celebrated in the park. Considering the long years since the baby's birth to his age now, Mike had been betraying me long before they started their affair. It was unexpected when Mike brought Ken home and demanded we live together. However, I have gathered enough evidence to divorce him and claim alimony at any time. I was planning to confront Mike with a divorce this week and report him to Child Services, but him bringing it up was conveniently in my favor. Given Mike's past actions, he probably thought he could flatter me into raising Ken, pushing this unreasonable task onto me. Then, he could smoothly kick us out, divorce me, and remarry Julie. I utterly despised Mike for being so shallow and self-centered. I'm sorry, but I'm not naive enough to fall for Mike's schemes. He's gravely mistaken if he thinks things will go as he planned. Mike seemed surprised to see Ken and me getting along well in our shared living arrangement. I wish you were my mom. I bet every day would be fun. Ken had once lamented. I'm just an aunt, not your mom. I had replied somewhat shyly at the time. Despite saying that, Ken is an honest child, and Max is very attached to him. I've always thought I wanted to be a family with him. Now that I know everything, I've made up my mind. I care about Ken far more than Mike or Julie. I will protect Ken. And I will reclaim my dignity. You might not have noticed, but I know everything. I know about your affair, the secret child with your partner, and that the child is Ken. An affair? That's impossible. Right, this kid is a relative. His parents are going abroad for a job transfer and can't take him, so they're in trouble. Isn't it normal to help a relative in need? Mike was shocked that I knew all about their deeds. Yet, he still thinks he can outsmart me. Continuing to lie without remorse. What is he trying to accomplish at this point? Even if Mike and Julie were to have a change of heart and apologize, what they've done to Ken cannot be forgiven. I won't be manipulated by Mike anymore. Since we're not getting anywhere, I have no choice but to call the police. Ignoring Mike's attempts to stop me, I called the police and explained everything to them upon their arrival. From Ken being left outside to the day I called the ambulance to help him, I told them everything. Watching me calmly speak to the police, Mike realized he couldn't control the situation and continued to hurl insults. The police took Mike away after his outburst. I learned from the officer who interviewed me that the police went directly to Julie's place for questioning without delay. During the police interrogation, a slew of issues and suspicions about their treatment of Ken came to light. It was revealed that when Mike and Julie spent time together, they often left Ken outside without pocket money or food. Ken was only allowed to bathe every 2 or 3 days. And wore the same unwashed clothes repeatedly. The details were heartbreaking to hear. Although I thought Ken hadn't suffered physical abuse, it became clear that they had been hitting and kicking him in places covered by his clothes, so it wouldn't be noticed by friends or teachers at school. I regret not realizing the severity of his situation sooner. To think my own husband was involved in such cruelty deeply shamed me. Despite the abuse, Ken grew up to be a straight and honest child, and I felt a strong desire to embrace and comfort him. The case went to court, and both Mike and Jolie received prison sentences. They were convicted of child neglect and sentenced to imprisonment. It was a deserved outcome. While I hoped they would reflect on their actions, Mike and Jolie had the audacity to ask me and Ken to write a letter of leniency for them. Such a letter is meant to request a lighter sentence for the offender from judges or prosecutors. In cases like traffic accidents, depending on the aftermath and relationship between parties. But there's no way Ken or I, who suffered due to their betrayal and mistreatment, would wish for their punishment to be reduced. Are they still struggling in vain? Perhaps they will never truly regret their actions. Truly beyond redemption. Of course, we immediately rejected their request. In our town, known for its safety, incidents requiring police intervention are rare. The misdeeds of Mike and Jolie became a major topic on local news broadcasts. Child abuse has become a significant social issue, often covered nationwide, indicating strong public interest in the matter. The community's view of them turned harsh, with whispers and rumors spreading, and online discussions even pinpointed their address, causing a stir. While I pity them, there's nothing more I can do for them. It was inevitable that their company found out, and I heard they were both fired soon after. Given that their names are now known to the public, I doubt Mike and Jolie will be able to find respectable work in the future. Since they are also required to pay us alimony, their life of poverty is almost certain after their sentence is served. As for me, I recently became legally Ken's parent through a special adoption process after the legal proceedings settled down. Ken spent some time in a child welfare facility, but I immediately registered as a foster parent, and after a trial foster care period, Ken was officially recognized as my child. The process took time and effort, but it was worth it considering the time I get to spend with Ken. Ken, I'm looking forward to our future together. Yeah. I'm happy to be with you, Auntie. Ken, though young, seems to understand the situation he's in. I heard he never cried for his mother or asked to go home. Maybe we should celebrate with a cake for now. I'd like to enroll him in some classes, but I wonder what he's interested in. Or perhaps, just spending time together is what Ken needs the most right now. First, let's talk a lot about the past and our future. I'll pour all my love into Ken. With these thoughts, I return home with Ken. Surrounded by adults and adjusting to a new environment, Ken seemed a bit exhausted at first but regained his brightness as our life settled down. Not just me, but Max, who's very fond of Ken, is also at home. Look, Max! Go that way! Ken and Max are as close as ever, playing chase and tossing toys together. Laughing like siblings. Watching their interaction is my blissful moment. Recently, taking walks with Max and Ken in the mornings and evenings has become our daily routine. No matter how bravely he behaves, Ken can't forget what his biological parents did. Being a child known for abuse in the news, he might be viewed differently by others. Thinking about Mike's betrayal still brings me down. But we must look forward and live for tomorrow. Together, we hold hands, healing our wounds slowly, living peacefully.